Hi, guys, welcome back for yet another amazing session here at the IIDA IIDA Summit initiative by the Architects Diary, partnered by Blendin. For those who are just joining on, my name is Benita Koshal. I am the editor in chief of the East India Perspective, and I will be your host for Screen One for both the days. So, yes, I cannot wait to see more. So, moving on, this next speaker that we have, let's give her a small little bit of an introduction. So, her name is Mariana Cabugueira. She's an architect and urban designer from Portugal. She's worked 5 years as a senior architectural designer at Zaha Hadid Architects and is currently working as the head and lead of design for the Metaverse company Wilder World. Graduated from the School of Architecture in Lisbon, she moved to London to explore design and technology through the postgraduate course Design Research Laboratory (DRL) at the Architectural Association School, that is AA. Mariana joined Zaha Hadid Architects right after graduating from AA School in 2017. She was a part of the competition cluster for about 5 years and the designer of winning projects such as the Navi Mumbai Airport, Western Sydney Airport, Exhibition Centre Beijing, their competition and completion of Tower C in Shenzhen. Currently, Mariana has jumped to the challenge of designing the metaverse, joining Wilder World as the head and lead of the MetaFuture era. But I'm pretty sure you would like to hear more about her, but definitely that has to be from the horse's mouth. So, yes, please let's welcome Mariana to the floor.
Hi, Vinita. Thank you so much for your introduction. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for your invitation. So let's get started and let's get my presentation on. Okay, so exactly like you said, I am Mariana Cabugueira. I am the director of Metaverse department with Wilder World. I have been a senior architectural designer and at Zaha Hadid Architects for 5 years. And I'm Portuguese. I'm also big in the academic world. I've been a teacher for 6 years now, 7 years now, and I usually teach a software called Maya. And recently, I am doing Maya and Unreal for Metaverse courses. Okay, so today, and since we are talking about the influence of technology in architecture, which is exactly what my career has been so far, I'm going to walk you through the beginning of my, let's say, my career. Started in school, so the beginning of everything when I was a student in Portugal, why I decided to go to London, which kind of course I did in London that was extremely technological. This led me to Zaha, and how after Zaha I decided to leave for a metaverse company. Okay, so I'm going to start from the academic times. I was a student for a very long time. I usually say that I don't recommend this to any student. It's not the recipe for success. That's really important that you understand that. But when I was in Portugal and I was studying, I realized that there was something missing. So I continued studying in other countries. So I studied in Portugal for 5 years. I studied in Milano, in Italy for 1 year. And then I studied in London for 2 years. So in the end, I did more or less 8 years or 7 years of school. Again, I don't recommend this, but I think I was left a bit with no choice. So when I was in Portugal and I was a student, so in my early 20s, I was a bit of a different student from the rest of the people from my classmates, the rest of my classmates. I was a little bit more plastic. I believed in form. Especially, I didn't believe in form for the sake of form. I believe that form has a responsibility in the context, and form is as important as material and as texture. Form has is part of our culture, of architecture, is part of our city. So I was very much around evolution and iteration of form and topology. Obviously, I was in a school that was extremely, let's say, modernist, in the sense that was very much in the 60s and with the 70s, from Le Corbusier and the studies from that time, so almost 100 years ago. But it was a school that was very much fixated in that. So everything I was doing was extremely different, and that came with some very hard times. obviously, and it obviously gave me this responsibility of having to work a bit more than everyone else to explain why I was doing different, which is kind of a very hard job to do. So when I finished my master's, my first master's in Lisbon, what happens when you finish a master? You have the same, a very similar panorama to India, actually, unpaid and internships. So after you study 6 years, you're going to work for free, which was kind of revolting for me. I was also gonna, the kind of offices that you have in Portugal are very small, so they don't do very big scales as well. They do mostly housing and small houses and very boxy houses. And at the same time, there's also this fixation of refurbishment of the old city and turning them into new, which was something that I was actually pretty much against. So this was the panorama after I finished when I was 24. And I decided that this had nothing to do with me and my identity as an architect. So I had no other option but to leave countries and to find a practice, and especially to find a course that would teach me how to do design in architecture, because I knew I was a designer without really knowing that this is the term for it. But I didn't have the skills, I didn't have the tools, that I was not close to any technological mean that would allow me to understand the kind of architecture that I really thought that made sense. That was nothing like this. So I started looking for other schools and for postgrads or even for PhDs, because I had already a master. And then I saw this school called the Architectural Association in London. And it was a school where Zaha had been a student before, Rem Koolhaas, Cedric Price, Bernard Tschumi, Stephen Hall, like all of these people, they had been students in this school before. So I thought that maybe there was something there, maybe there was another way of thinking, another practice. So I decided to go for an open day. Open days are extremely important when you're looking for an international school. They usually open the school to foreigners and to new students, and they explain you all the courses that they are doing. So you get more or less a good overview of what's happening in the school. In this same day, so the same day that the school was doing this open day, there was a final presentation of a very important post-graduation course that I didn't know about. And everyone was running to this auditorium, and I could only see the people running to the auditorium, and there was a big fuss. The auditorium was full and in darkness. And then I decided to walk in, and when I walked in, I was faced with this overwhelming number of panels and design and renders and animations and with theories behind design. And Zaha is usually a jury there. Patrick Schumacher is the head of one of the studios. So everyone was watching this presentation, so I decided to stay. And this course is called Design Research Laboratory in London, in the Architectural Association, where Zaha is a jury and Patrick Schumacher is a teacher. So when I stayed and when I heard them talking, everything they were saying, especially the theory part, was exactly very much in sync with what I thought and what I was trying to explain back in my country, but 10 steps ahead, obviously. So I thought this is the right place. And little did I know that in 2 years, I'll be the one presenting on that auditorium with the same amount of panels and with the same jury, except for Zaha, because she died in the process. So I decided I'm going to join DRL. I went back home and I said, I'm going to join. This is an extremely technological course. So as the name says, it's Design Research Laboratory. So you are researching design in architecture. You go back in history of technology, especially of CAD, okay, so computer-aided design. You start with computer-aided design, and then you go through algorithms. You go through all of these softwares that help design and enhance design and encourage design. So I had to learn all of these softwares from scratch at the DRL, okay? It's 6 months learning all of these softwares. So from Grasshopper, 3ds Max, C++, processing, Rhino, Unity, Maya, V-Ray, you have 6 months to learn this with them. And then you start a studio. And that's the most important part about the RL. You start a studio and you start a very important research, and a kind of theme for this research is very much based on the studio. So you have the studio that is from Theodore Spyropoulos. He's actually the head, the director of the RL. And it's a studio that is a little bit more around assembly, around prototyping, around human behavior. And then you have the studio of Shaja Bhushan, which I don't know if you know him, but he's incredible. And Alicia Nomad as well. And they do robotic fabrication, but most importantly, they prepare geometry for robotic fabrication. And then you have Patrick Schumacher's studio. And Patrick's studio is a little bit more... a bit more like the culture of an office, in this case of Zaha office. So it's extremely design driven. It has a thesis behind though. So obviously I picked Patrick Schumacher's studio because of parametricism, basically. So then I started with like a whole year for this thesis. You work obviously in teams. There's no individual work, especially not in architecture. So I work with Juan Carlos and Nicolas Tornero from Chile, Juan from Bogota, and we worked together for a whole year, extremely intense year. Our thesis is about exoskeletons, okay, which is something that maybe you have seen before. Usually now they are coming back at the design for the design trends, but exoskeletons is basically a technique that you use to take the structure from inside of the towers and place them outside on the perimeter of the tower. So when you do this, and we did it through something called topology optimization, when you do this, you kind of liberate the tower from the interior of the tower, from columns and from cores. So that's the whole point of creating exoskeletons in towers. And that was our thesis. It was a very long, super hard working thesis. And then in the end, we presented in this big auditorium. And as we finished, obviously, I spoke with Patrick. Zaha was my plan A when I was doing DRL. I never thought about joining Zaha. I'm from a very small country and a very humble environment, so we barely think about big offices. But when I was at the DRL, it made sense. It actually became my plan A. There was no plan B. So I spoke with Patrick, and Patrick recommended me to the competition cluster. I had an interview with the director of the competition cluster. And then I was accepted and I joined Zaha Hadid Architects in 2017. So I joined a very peculiar department, a very special department that is called the Z cluster. So clusters is usually the term used for, let's say, department, because the office is really big. I think they are 500 at this point, and they need to be split in clusters or departments. So you have cluster 1, cluster 2, cluster 3, so on. But there's one special cluster called the Zaha cluster. So this cluster was the last cluster that, this cluster was the last cluster that Zaha created. She created, I think, 15 years ago or something. And basically it's called Zaha cluster because it's the cluster that she would come and see the projects from. This cluster is usually, its point is basically to develop design and competitions with an extremely design-driven solution. Competitions are usually the biggest ones, so the ones against, I don't know, Foster's or MA or MAD or all these kind of offices, they're run for very specific competitions, and Zaha cluster is assigned to be part of the mega competitions. As you can imagine, in a very big firm and a successful firm, not all projects look like this, okay? That's something that it's important to understand, especially business side, business-wise. Not all projects need to be with extra budget and with extra design. The ones that don't have extra budget and extra design, you don't see them. Maybe I don't even see them. They are not published. But the ones that are published usually come from this cluster, okay? It's 30 people. Now I think it's 40 people. And they all have one very important thing in common, which is the technology that they are running behind. It's a software called Maya from Autodesk. Okay, so Maya from Autodesk is one of the most responsible tools for the DNA of Zaha design. And it's a software that everyone who works at Zaha cluster needs to have and needs to kind of manage quite proficiently. So what are the principles of Maya? I'm going to run them like super quickly, but it's important that you see how different this is from your traditional 3D modeling software, not like Rhino. So Maya works a little bit similarly to 3ds Max. It works as an object mode, face mode, edge modes, and vertex mode. So everything that you do revolves around these 4 components. All the transformations are about these 4 components. Then Maya has one very, very important and particular feature in it that Rhino has been trying to replicate with Rhino sub D, but it's still very, very far away from reaching this. And 3ds Max is also kind of trying. But Maya has a very important algorithm inside called the Maya Catmull-Clark subdivision. This is an algorithm that you don't have to deal with. We don't code. We are definitely not coders. I'm not a coder at all. The algorithm was built inside of Maya. You don't see the numbers even. You just press 1 or number 3 on the keyboard, and you change from a non-subdivided mesh to a subdivided mesh that is traditionally smooth. Okay, that's why all the projects that you see are smooth. It's because Maya allows this algorithm to be run on meshes. How do you start? Very simple, exactly like any other 3D modeling software. You start from a cube, you start from a torus, you start from a plane, and then as you start manipulating the edges, the vertices, and the faces, and you start using the Maya Catmull-Clark subdivision, you start getting all of these smooth projects. Okay, so one of the most common questions that I get whenever I'm creating and whenever I show my work and my students is, how do you start modeling? How do you start a project? My job at Zaha was for 5 years to develop as many projects and as many ideas I could for a brief. Okay, so we would have a brief, let's say a tower for office spaces, and it's in a very specific country, and the client wants you to kind of bring a bit of the culture of the country to the project. My job was to develop as many options as you can imagine for this tower. Okay, so let's say 3 options per week. I would design and I would create 3 options for a tower per week, and then the next week I'll develop 3 more options, then 3 more, and that was my job. So how do I start creating? I start exactly like everyone else. I start with an empty screen, usually in 3D. I always have a very rough and very irrelevant sketch on the side. Okay, my sketches before I start modeling or I start creating are absolutely non-artistic. They are not meant to be seen. You actually don't show hand sketches, but they are informing my 3D, and they are informing the steps that I'm gonna take to make this 3-dimensional. Okay, they are informative. They are giving me the clues for how do I actually start this in 3D. And then at some point when I start in 3D, I just take the flow, and I don't need the sketch anymore, and I'm just going along with the software and my ideas as well. So that's usually how I start. Sometimes I start right ahead in 3D. For example, this case was actually for a class. I start in 3D and then I start sketching at the same time that I'm modeling. Sometimes I take some references on sculptures, not for Zaha, of course, but that doesn't fly really well. These references are usually for classes, so references for topologies that actually became typologies in architecture. So that's a little bit how it starts. So basically in school, when I joined, my level of Maya was, let's say, 2 out of 5. 1 out of 5, probably, because 5 as a professional environment is very different from what you learn from school, as you know. So I was very much behind, and I was the youngest in the cluster, and I could understand that I was behind in the software. So I decided to give it like a very big push and to start working overtime and working over the weekends to understand how this software works. And I spent a long time learning and pushing for it. So all you can see in front of you is just design I was doing on the side, and just for me. It was just for me to understand the software and the tools and to reach the professional level of the software. So when I became pretty good at it, and I did, because when you really push yourself and you believe that you'll get it, usually you do. So when I became really good at Maya, I decided I'm going to go back to the DRL and I'm going to teach there, because the teacher who taught me Maya was actually pretty average. Which is the reason why my level was so average. So I decided, let me go back. I'm going to teach them, and they will be more ready for the office, or they will create their projects with no difficulties, without taking the tool as an obstacle. So I went back to the DRL while I was working at Zaha, and I taught Maya for 3 unofficial years and then 2 official years. So it was almost 5 years teaching Maya at the DRL. This is some of the results of the students. So you can tell that the software has a very big footprint on the design. And that's why we recognize this as Zaha, because the software is the same and the techniques are very much similar as well. And then at some point, and with the pandemic as well, I started teaching live for the DRL. And that's when I kind of decided I can also teach live for people outside of the DRL who are not part of this niche, because DRL is still a niche. It's only 30 people. And I can actually teach this worldwide to everyone who's interested in joining. So I started teaching live over the weekends. I started doing a lot of partnerships with these online academic kind of platforms, and I really encourage you to take all of these courses. You have some very good people teaching very good softwares. You have people from Foster teaching you Rhino, people from Zaha teaching you Maya. So I really recommend you to take these courses. I wish I had them when I was a student. So I started doing them over the weekend. I started teaching stuff that they didn't have to be architectural. They were just for technique. They were to teach you the technology behind, the software behind. And I started doing a lot of projects for my own. Okay, so projects that had no other interest except from teaching, which kind of gave me a very good activity outside of office. Basically, I was having a lot of fun creating this. So I partnership with Live Academy. I partnership with other architects also for classes, for example, the concert hall. And I partnership with a very important platform called Futurely. And right now we are like a family. And basically I decided, okay, let me teach this Maya properly, because I was getting a lot of students and a lot of attraction. So I decided I'm going to teach this from beginners, intermediates, and advanced. And I'm going to make this a whole workshop, like a proper studio for my classes. So I started, for example, this was a project for beginners level. The second class was already a little bit like you work in an office, so you would have to do Maya and Rhino at the same time. So it is a little bit more architectural. And then the final one was actually interiors, which is extremely advanced, but basically replicates what you do at Zaha for a Zaha cluster, for example. So at that period of time, I was working mainly at Zaha, and I was doing all of these classes on the side, and I was doing 1,000 of projects on both ends. And I think from Zaha, it's important to highlight some of the most important competition for me. So I think I've done almost 50 or 30 something competitions. So it's a lot of projects. There are some of them, most of them I cannot publish, I cannot show because they are not published, obviously. So the ones that were published and the ones that were the most important for me was by far the Navi Mumbai Airport. It was a project where I was young, but I did one of the most important features in there, which is this lotus column that you see. And it was kind of my baby. And I worked on it for 2 years. I think it was 2 years. We are already making almost construction. And then unfortunately, the private client, which was GBK, was kind of involved in some issues, financial issues. So the project had to stop. And it was commissioned to a Canadian company, actually. Another airport that I did that was very important for me was the Sydney airport. And then after Sydney, that we won as well. And it was a very important project that I worked for. And then beside that, the Beijing exhibition was also another project that is going to be built. And it was a competition that I was part of. And it was very important for me as well. By far, the most important project, and the one that I want to show here today, is the Shenzhen Tower C. This was the project that I did the competition for 2 years ago, and it's also my last project at Zaha because we won the competition, and I was invited to stay on the team for completion, so for construction, which I accepted. Obviously, it was a very long time. It was almost a year and a half working on it, and then I left. So basically, the Shenzhen Tower, it was a competition for Twin Towers for China. It was a competition where MAD was running, Foster, SOM, I don't know, a UN studio. So all of Big, I think, was also on it. So all of this, it was a great plot, a great opportunity in the city. So all of these offices were working extra hard for it. And we started in a very small team. We were only 3 or 4 designers. I was definitely the youngest one, but I did 1,000 of ideas for this plot. So this plot had 1,000 of different towers. And then my first idea was to hug the towers instead of doing two separate twin towers, to hug them and to turn them into a single tower, um, a bit like, I don't know, with a bit more emotion, as if they were hugging. And then my project leader decided to kind of lift this beautiful wing that you see on the side, and this wing will bring this mega green park inside the tower. And that was our first and final solution for the tower. Then obviously the team grew a lot. It became a mega team because the project had a lot of potential at some point. And then we submitted the project. I think it was in during December 2020. And then we found out that we won in January, and that's when we started a mega team for construction. So I was responsible for the first 8 floors that you see on the bottom. So they are the public floors, they are mostly the green floors, they are the landscape floors where retail happens. Okay, all of these shops are happening, and you have a mega shopping mall happening inside with cinemas. So it was extremely challenging. And this basement that you see there, it's actually a big headache, but it was a lot of fun, obviously, and it was one of the most important projects in my career. So at the same time, what happened when we were working remotely, you start doing a lot of projects on the side as well, especially for the teaching. And then we started talking about this Web3 and what Facebook calls the Metaverse, but what's really is called is Web3. And you start looking at your projects in a different way, and you think maybe the projects that I have been doing outside of work will actually have a purpose, and maybe people will actually experience it and travel in it. So I started developing with more and more detail projects that could live on the digital world. Okay, so I started doing both on the side. On one side, I was doing Tower C. On the other side, I was developing projects that I knew that could have potential for what we call the metaverse. So before I jump into the metaverse, I'm just going to run through very simple concepts without being too boring for you. But just so you understand, because I know that we are very much in the beginning of this, so it's good to run the basics of the concepts that are behind. So let's imagine the metaverse as more or less a second skin or like a second city, okay? A second layer of our city. They are not separate, at least not for now, but the digital world and the physical world are complementary. So one belongs to the other one, and so on. So basically the metaverse, let's imagine a mega urban fabric, like we know from the real city. They have these little plots, okay? So the plots that we all know where we have our buildings. These plots inside of Metaverse are called NFTs. They are called NFTs because they are non-fungible tokens. They are basically meant to be sold as digital property of land, exactly like we do in the real estate of real cities, let's say physical cities. The Metaverse basically gathers all of these NFTs, so all of these plots that can be sold, and they create this second fabric of a city that is working in parallel and in simultaneous with our real city. All of this happens in what's more important, way more important than the metaverse, is called Web3. Okay, Web3 is what I want you to remember, because a metaverse is a trend, is a name and a definition that will end as soon as Meta ends. All of this investment on metaverse will probably go down as well. But there's one very important thing that is happening, and that is called Web3. So right now we are living in the World Wide Web 2, okay, which is, like the name says, two-dimensional. Our Instagram, our social platforms, all of them are two-dimensional, right? They're 2Ds. And then what's being developed as we talk is Web3, okay, which is the three-dimensional space. And that's a technology that has been in progress for, I don't know, a decade. And it's kind of getting prepared to be as common as TV, as common as your phone, for example. And it's inside of Web3 that Metaverse happens. And it's not just Metaverse. Inside of Web3, you have all of these multi-dimensional spaces that everyone wants to create that are not called necessarily Metaverse. They're called something else. But they are inside of Web3. One day, which we will not get to see it, we'll probably not be here, there will be a Web 4, and Web 4 is exactly what we have been calling as the 4K kind of living off space, and that will be probably the ultimate experience of the digital space. What we are aiming for is just a simple Web3, which is spaces where we can walk in and walk out. That's Web3. Okay, so basically this is a scenario. This is what we call the metaverse. It's the NFTs inside of a Web3 platform. Okay, there will be multiple metaverses where you can just walk in, walk out, do whatever you want, but it will be still parallel to our real city. Okay, so when this started, and it's true that Meta did give like a very good push to this, the company, Meta, the company. A lot of offices, including Zaha, started receiving commission projects. Okay, so projects from, in this case, Czech Republic president. They were commissioning these digital cities. But very important for us architects, they are not just digital cities. Actually, you can see that there's a lot of gravity happening. Typologies are different, but they are not radically different. They are only different. And this is because they are meant for mixed realities. What does this mean? You can get this on a digital platform like Metaverse, but you can also get it built. Okay, it's still buildable to a certain point, and then obviously you'll have to make an extra stretch to actually make it buildable. But mixed realities for us architects are very important, because that means that your project can be in the metaverse and can actually be built as well. And this is the kind of projects that have been commissioned to offices like Zaha, offices like Big. In parallel, unfortunately, the metaverse is still looking like this, okay? Still looking extremely crappy, and it's being designed by game designers who try to replicate what architecture from architects is, which is kind of sad. And when I saw this, so when I understood the potential of metaverse, and then I saw what the metaverse really was, I was extremely disappointed, and that was one of the reasons why I decided to accept the challenge that was given to me, and to actually decide to design the metaverse from the perspective of an architect, and not from the perspective of someone who's trying to replicate architecture. Okay, so some offices started doing more or less this, okay, trying to challenge what the metaverse is. So you have like these small platforms that will probably get big really, really quickly, like Voxel Architects, Spaces as well. So BRK is also getting some commissions for this metaverse. They are doing a very interesting, I mean, at this point, the project is not super interesting, but the work that is behind is extremely interesting, which is what kind of typologies are we doing then in the metaverse? What kind of culture is it? So how do we travel the space? How does a house look like? How does an office look like? How does a concert hall looks like? Okay, so that's a very interesting work that BRK is doing. And then I started looking at my work, and I thought that it will be very interesting to bring this software, Maya, and the kind of projects that Maya does into this platform, and to challenge architecture and to challenge design in a digital world. Okay, so I look at my projects, and I saw for the first time that they might be going somewhere, and there's a different future for them, which is extremely interesting. And then at some point last year, I was invited to join as the director of a whole era of architecture for a metaverse company called Wilder World. Okay, it's a company that has already 10 years. It's a company made of 150 people all around the world, India as well. And these people are working non-stop. Okay, this office is working non-stop because it's 24 hours around the world. Everyone works remotely. So the office doesn't close at some point, the company. And everyone is doing from game design to game developers to film design, and now architects like me. So what's important to understand what's running behind the metaverse. If you are interested, obviously, as an architect, you can just do your design and then you send your design and you don't care. But I think that it's important that you understand what's the logistic behind. That's exactly like in architecture. We are not engineers, but we have to understand engineering. We are not, technicals, but we need to understand how does a toilet work, or how does water work, or how electricity works. So I would encourage you to understand how the metaverse works as the engineering point of view. Okay, so on one side, usually you have the designers, and the designers are film designers. For example, I'm working with a lot of people who design Blade Runner, Marvel, Tomb Raider, and now there's a guy coming from Dune, Halo. So you have a lot of people who did film design. You have obviously the game designers who understand even better what's the engineering behind. And then you start having your architects who I think have the responsibility to create the new architecture, like we always had, the new architecture for this world, okay, for the digital world. I think it's our responsibility. If we don't take it, someone else will take it. And then in parallel, you have your engineers, okay? So the people who do the game design, who do development, Epic Games is extremely important. It has a mega platform in all this. Epic Games is allowing all of these softwares like Unreal to be run for free at this point, and they are the only metaverse that is for free. And they have one of the biggest platforms for you to put your architecture inside and to create the game, which is called Unreal Engine. And then you also have Unity, but I recommend you to have a look at Unreal. So basically, this is the mega goal of Wilder. It's to create, we can say metaverse, but it's more like their own platform inside of Web3. It's to create a mega city inspired by Miami. So they call it Miami. And basically, I was given a whole city, Miami City, and I am designing every plot, every tower, every building. And I'm also putting up a team with mostly people who designed for Zaha. So there's a very important DNA in there, from Zaha Hadid to Metaverse. And you'll sell the plots, you sell the projects, and you start having these public events where everyone can go. It's an open world, and the point is to have everyone coming to the city and then coming in and out whenever you want. You leave, or you just stay for how long you want, and that's basically the whole thing. Obviously, when I saw the potential of this for architects, I know there's still a lot of skeptics, but it's unfortunate because it's a mega business. And it's not just that. We really have the responsibility to say to the world, how does the next generation of space look like? Okay, because this is what we have been doing since the beginning of civilization. Now that we are shifting to the virtual world, we still should be the ones saying, how does architecture look like? So I started a studio for students. I ran my first studio some months ago. It's called the Metafluid Studio, where I'm basically teaching exactly this. I'm not just teaching design, I'm also teaching Maya, but it's very important to teach what's happening behind. Okay, so what's the engineering behind? So Unreal, the game development side. So I'm teaching Maya, I'm teaching Unreal, and the whole point of the studio is for the students to create a mega urban scenario. I didn't include here, but it looks amazing. A mega urban scenario that is uploaded in the virtual environment, and you can just walk in and out. And it was a studio that did so well, and it was ballistic, that I have to create a second one, a 2.0, and it's going to happen in October. And basically, this is my latest project for the metaverse, my personal one. That's basically it. I think we are ready to start Q&A. So whenever someone has any question, anything you'd like to ask, feel free.
Yeah, hi Mariana. That was, I am in awe of actually what you showed and explained. So I kind of am still in that aura where I'm moving around in the metaverse, really trying to imagine the entire scale of what you just spoke. I mean, it is absolutely something that, like I was just talking about it while back only, that when we are like doing our own work and everything, of course we get to experiment and everything, but it's when we interact with such individuals like yourself is when we realize that there is actually like something like
Yeah, what's
go and
happening?
watch. Yeah, I mean, we go and watch Iron Man, but there might be an Iron Man, like, I don't know, 40 years from now or something.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
actually might be the reality of tomorrow, and it was just amazing to see that. So yes,
Thank you.
I'm going to, yeah, encourage anybody from the audience, if you have any questions that you would like to shoot to us, You can email them at idasummit@gmail.com. So yeah, we'll just wait for 2 minutes if there any questions pop up. Else we will, or we can also, what we can do is, once the questions come across, we will try that we get Mariana to, answer them with a prompt reply. Yes, I think we are getting some questions now. We'll just. Okay, so we have one. I feel it's a little okay. Never mind. We should still ask question. Like, let's. So, Mariana, what is your take on blockchain technology and metaverse? I think you did answer about the metaverse bit of it.
Yeah.
I guess what the person wants to know is, what is your take on blockchain technology?
So blockchain is directly connected to metaverse. The one allows a metaverse to happen. So obviously, I'll say that I'm completely in for it, and I don't think it will end very quickly. I think the foundations are big enough for people to invest on it. So I would obviously encourage you to have a part on blockchain and to start having tokens and understand what the crypto world is as well. So uh, that's my take. And I think actually, funny enough, India is extremely developed when it comes to technology, and they're extremely involved in metaverse. There's a lot of people from India at Wilder, so I would encourage you to join this as well, especially if you know people who are already in there.
Okay. Are there any simpler softwares for creating such amazing scale building? It's a student who is asking this. So
Yeah,
apart from Maya, is I think
yeah,
what they mean.
of course, you have like simpler software. So Maya is like a fluid software that is a little bit more complex because it's also architectural in a sense that it works in meters, is a bit more accurate as well. So it comes as a bit more complex. That, for example, the software that I'm gonna suggest to you, which is also a software that is for free, that is called Blender. So Blender is for free. It's also about fluid architecture and fluid, not architecture, okay, fluid forms and organic forms. That's what Blender does, but it's not accurate. It doesn't have measurements, so it's not really an architectural software, I would say. But it's still like a software that I would recommend you to have a look at. So it's called Blender. Maybe I can write here Blender, and you have also it's for free. You like download it in a second, and you have loads of tutorials on YouTube for this.
Okay, although this is, I personally would like to ask. So, like you said, of course, that Blender is a software that comes close to fluid forms. But architecturally, if you in your personal take have to choose a software which has done the best to come close to Maya and its graphic quality, if I may call it, which one would you recommend?
Architecture that is not Maya then, but wants to do what Maya does, I think Rhino.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. We have a few more. We're just waiting for the questions to pop up. It's coming across. Okay, yeah, we have another one. Where to begin the fluid modeling journey?
Um, I would say begin with understanding nature, especially, and don't look at nature as just a source of aesthetics at all. Look at nature as the way it evolves, and especially look at the parametrics inside of nature. So, a couple of books called "Nature Follows Form" or "Form Follows Nature," something like that. You'll see nature from the point of view of mathematics and from the point of view of parameters, and that's usually extremely connected to fluid forms. Fluid and organic allows nature to live longer, for a reason, and that was one of the biggest sources for Zaha to understand organic structures, okay, which is a bit like nature is. Nature is a mega structure that evolved in time longer than us humans have. So this kind of gave a lot of hints for the next kind of structure, and that's why the structure is usually extremely fluid from Zaha. So I'll start from nature. Now I'll start understanding why is nature fluid, what kind of parameters are inside of nature, and don't look at it just as an aesthetic. Okay, that's something that's really important. It's the biggest challenge: is don't look at things just aesthetically. Understand why is it standing up, why did it survive, and why did the species change so much. So look at nature differently, and I think that's a good start.
Right. So we have a bunch of more questions which have popped up, Mariana. So we'll just quickly go across them. So there's this very sweet message actually that has actually also popped up for you. It says that, "Hi Mariana, as always, your presentation transcends me. As this is an unreal world, are there any real life parameters that you will take as a challenge in your design, as in the design that you're creating for the wilder world that you said?" So yeah, that's the question.
That's a great question. And I think that's the question that architects should ask themselves the most, which is what do we want to take from the world? And at the same time, like we look at Web3 and we think there's like a billion of possibilities and there's no obstacles. First, from the point of view of engineering, there are a lot of obstacles, unfortunately. So the digital world is still very much dependent on the physical world. So if you're it needs a big server, it needs a big computer, it needs a big storage. So all of this works as a constraint in the digital world. Digital world is not truly independent. It's very much dependent on us and the kind of computer you have even, and the kind of server you can allow for the metaverse. So this means that it constrains your design a lot. So if your design has, I don't know, 2,000 polygons, it will weight this much to a project that has 1,000 of polygons. So your project, you'd want it to be like in the world, the real world, to be repeatable, to be standardized, to be everything like the normal architecture. Because if you repeat it, you can turn it as instances, which means that it doesn't weight anything. It's not heavy to your computer. So the most thing that they ask me the most is this repeatable? What part of the project can we repeat and it doesn't weight anything? Exactly like architecture. So that's a big obstacle. There are a lot of limitations. And then what I want the architects to think about is what we want to take from the real world that will help people to navigate in the digital world. So what kind of typologies do they need to recognize? Because we learn how to navigate in streets, we know what a road is, we know what a door is, we know what a window is, we know what a corridor is meant for. And if you go to the metaverse and you go absolutely dystopian, people would not know how to navigate in it. They would not recognize, and at the same time they will not create any links to this space. So they will not feel a bedroom as a bedroom, they will not feel a home as a home. Especially, let's imagine concert halls are easier to understand of the metaverse because it's a public event. I think that will be quickly something that will come to the metaverse quite quickly. So you could see your concert like from your house, and maybe a lot of people can see the concert from your house and from your VR. But you have to understand what's the stage is, where is the stage, and we need a little bit of traditional links of our physical world in the digital world, so you understand how things happen, and you also feel like a link to it. So I think that's something that architects should really think about, because we are not doing dystopian art, we are still doing architecture.
Okay. So we have a bunch of, I think it's quite similar. So I'll just, in one question, ask it out that how should architecture students start preparing for being, what they are calling metaverse architects? So how should they start preparing? What should be their journey?
I think that one thing that is important is people don't have to be part of the metaverse. You are part of it if you want to, uh, which is like very important. Not everyone should, or not everyone really wants to be. I think I'm very happy to know that people want to stay on the real architecture because it still needs to be developed, right? So it's important to have good people designing good buildings still. But I think what's important for a metaverse architect is to understand if you are a designer and what's your interest on design. So do you want to be a designer on metaverse? You'll have to look for softwares that really enable you to push the boundaries of design, because we don't want to just copy and paste the real architecture to the digital one. We want to bring a step further, not too far, but just one step further, especially in design and softwares. So I think I would start by that.
Okay. Okay. Now with projects in coming up linked the line in Saudi Arabia, do you think that the meta world may soon be something we will be looking to realize, or is it truly only for virtual purpose and flexing our creativity?
I think that what I think it's the most important strategy for us architects, and this is literally just a strategy, is to create projects that are meant for what we call mixed realities. Okay, so it's a project that it can and it should be part of the metaverse, but you can still make it buildable. So whenever you have, let's say, a competition, an architecture competition, you lost your competition, and you're running for, I don't know, competition in the real world, okay, and you lost it, but you really like the project. You take the project, you probably give it a different twist, so it's a little bit more challenging, and you can include it on the metaverse. So we are kind of making our business twice as interesting and profitable than when we were doing just the real world. You can multiply the options of your building that lost and will not serve for anything else. You gave it a purpose and probably will profit from it. And then I also believe that a lot of projects should stay on the metaverse. I think the line is another one. It will be a super cool metaverse project to have. Is it really a project that is looking at social criterias in the real world? I don't think so. I don't think it's addressing any social, and quite the opposite. I think it's a test. And if it's a test, put it on the metaverse. There's no need to be testing in the real world with a real footprint, especially in environment.
Okay, one last one, which actually this question has been roaming around in my head as well. Which is more interesting, according to you, of course, building in W3 or in real life?
Um, it depends on who you asking, obviously. So there's no real answer.
Your personal
Yeah,
choice, like.
personally, I'm extremely Mediterranean. Okay, I'm Portuguese. I'm from a small country that deals with a lot of palpable things and techniques. So I think that in my soul, I'm still very much Mediterranean. I still prefer to get my hands on a site and a construction site. And I think that in the future, I hope to be able to have both. But I think my heart is still on the sense of touching. But let's see how this goes.
Thank you so much, Mariana. That was one of the most thought-provoking sessions that I think I've ever heard. So thank you so much. I mean, honestly, my head has been blown into a different perspective altogether. I mean, of course, we have been hearing about the metaverse, and yes, we read about it. But of course, this was a revelation. So thank you so much for coming and showing us this perspective, showing us what we were missing out and what is in store for all of us as residents, not even just as architects.
Exactly,
Uh,
as residents.
exactly, as global residents as well. So thank you so much, and yeah, I cannot thank you enough for
It
the
was my pleasure. Thank you. It was a pleasure being here.
Okay. And to the audience, guys, we'll be joining again with another session very soon. But till for now, this is where we finish this session. But please do not leave. You are free to just, we'll be taking a very short, quick 15-minute break. And after that, we have a very interesting video session by B. Ark Engels. So you would definitely not want to miss that. So joining you in the next maximum 5 to 10 minutes. Don't go anywhere.